Vaya con Dios, amigo.
What's that mean?
Go with God.
You're listening to the Rock God Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Rock God Podcast, the only podcast that talks to rock and heavy metal musicians and artists about their thoughts or opinions about God. I'm your host, David Locklear, the owner and head writer at heavy-vinyl.com. Today we are talking to Sergio Amalfitano, the vocalist for the band ACxDC, also known as Antichrist Demoncore, a band who uses the power violent genre to address the societal ills that they see all around them. ACxDC formed in 2003, and they have released several EPs and 2 studio albums. EPs He Had It Coming from 2005, The Second Coming 2012, Postcard Flexi in 2015, and The Oracles of Death in 2016. They also released their full-length debut album in 2014, the self-titled, and they just recently released their newest full-length for Prosthetic Records, Satan is King, a sort of tongue-in-cheek title that serves as a response to Kanye West's album Jesus is King. Although the album is released during an election year and against the backdrop of a politically fraught environment, the members of Antichrist Demoncore are not proponents for party politics. Their message, like their music, retains a distinctly DIY attitude. As always, the band is politically charged, distributing sonically raw patches at breakneck speed as the true seam of revolution runs through the album's lyrics, imploring the need for immediate and drastic action to save the planet, and ourselves. Railing against corporations, pushing back against institutions that oppress, and challenging the concept of critical thought in the face of society that rewards greed and champions homogeneous thinking all form threads in the fabric of Satan is King. However, Satan here serves as a motif for rebellion, for self-discovery, and rejecting authority rather than as a literal figure of praise. Today we talk to Sergio about these issues, as well as what it means to be a vegan anarchist. So your new record is this is your first on Prosthetic Prosthetic Records, is that correct?
Yeah, this is our debut on Prosthetic. We've had a debut on
like 5 years ago on another record label, Melatonin, but this is the first time working with Prosthetic.
Okay. Yeah, because you've had, 3 albums? Am I correct?
No, this is the second LP. We've had LPs come out before, but they're like collections. So we had a discography LP that collected like kind of the first 10 years. Then we had the self-titled LP after that. Now we have this one with Prosthetic, and we have another LP coming out that's also another collection. So technically, we've only really released 2 LPs.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right. I misunderstood then. I was looking through your catalog and yeah.
Oh no, yeah, like that. All the stuff on the internet is like most of it's kind of inaccurate, But like people are like, they broke up for 5 years. I'm like, we broke up for a year and a half. Like, there's like a lot of inaccuracies, but whatever. It's the internet.
Well, yeah, this new one. I was reading through the lyrics. And I have to say, I was taken aback by the fact that with a title like Satan is King, I was, I have to say I was primed for some serious black metal vibes, but I don't think I got that at any point. It's all very political, and it's very sort of the moment, like social commentary type stuff.
Yeah, which is drastically against everything that black metal sort of stands for. I mean, the only thing that we kind of have in terms of black metal is the ideas of like individualism and sort of a streak of nihilism. I'm not like super depressing and a nihilist all the time. So like we have some connections in that sense, but I think it was just more of an aesthetic choice. To me, like Satan represents, the first anarchist, the first rebel. I'm a big fan of Mikhail Bakunin, and he wrote a book, I guess it would count, or a manifesto, whatever, and it was called God and the State, and we followed very heavily from that for some of the liner notes and some of the ideas in the record.
Right. And so a lot of this, it struck me really as, I don't think apolitical is the word I'm looking for, but it's very much anti-party establishment. Yeah,
very, very much anti-organizational politics. Like I myself am an anarchist. I can't speak for the other guys. The guys take care of the music. I take care of kind of the social commentary. So for myself, I would say that, I'm very much against voting, politicians, police, the whole nine.
Right. And so, well, expand on that a little bit for me about what it means to be an anarchist in your opinion.
Sure. So, I mean, anarchism is not just like a political philosophy. It's sort of a life philosophy. You apply it to all areas of your life, whether it's, some people like to dominate as parents and say, I'm the authority figure here. With me, it's more authoritative than authoritarian, meaning, I'm here to protect you. I'm here to guide you. I'm here to use your natural curiosity to educate you. But it also means breaking down sort of family relationships or dynamics, gender roles, not relying on the government in terms of morality or ethics or any of that sort of stuff. It's such a huge deal, like, thing to explain being an anarchist. You know what I mean? It's just, like, it's basically, like, respecting authority that's derived from knowledge versus authority that's derived from fear or violence or anything like that,
Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily a call to let's destroy everything around us, but it's more like let's maybe destroy the existing foundations and rebuild, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. So it can be seen as a destructive thing, but, I mean, all anarchism has been kind of portrayed as being destructive, but, if you look at May Day and the 8-hour workday and unions and, fighting fascism in Spain, Italy, and Germany, if you look at what's happening in Rojava right now, if you look at all that sort of stuff, that's all anarchism, people that want to fight for direct democracy, for lack of, a better term or whatever, that's anarchism. Emma Goldman fighting for women's rights to have, birth control and for people fighting for the right to abortion. Those things come from anarchism, LGBTQ queer rights and all that sort of stuff. It very much came from anarchism and anarchist streaks of people that don't fit into mainstream society and think mainstream society trying to fit us into a mold definitely does not work.
Mm-hmm.
Anarchism is just upholding the individual, which that's how I tie it into Satanism. Satan was the first person to say, hey, God wants you to be subservient. God wants you to be this animalistic kind of idiot, and I'm telling you to hear it from the tree of knowledge, have a sense of, what's going on around you and understanding and that sort of stuff. So,
yeah, that's one that actually is one of those things that has always bugged me is when I hear about the tree of knowledge. It's like it's interesting because when you read the actual script or the actual scripture, it says the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And mm-hmm. I feel like that's such an interesting distinction to make because when you think about just knowledge, you're thinking, okay, this is learning, it's good. But when it's like presented in the biblical sense, where it says it's knowledge of good and evil, the idea that we didn't know what good and evil was, and then the devil presented it to us. That has always stuck with me, and I always kind of find that fascinating because everybody who reads that they have it's a one or the other interpretation of it.
But it's definitely the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and it's a liberatory thing because in that sense, God didn't give you morality. Mm-hmm. The devil let you know what morality was. So if God only wanted obedience, that's not really morality. That's just following orders. Morality, I think, comes from sort of an innate sense of I want to do good, or I want to do bad, or I want to do the best that I can, Mm-hmm. So to know that the distinction is definitely not a trait that I would attribute to God passing down to whatever, if God happened to exist. Again, we're talking all myths from my point of view,
Right.
But, so that's where I would, kind of exalt the myth of Satan as being, kind of a better role model, if you will, than God or whatever.
I see. So with when you talk about Satanism, so do you follow more of the idea of like the Church of Satan, the Anton LaVey, or are you talking more of like the modern Church of Satan? Is it Church of Satan? I can't remember the distinction. I'm sorry. My brain is farting out on me here.
There's with the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple. That's what it was.
That's it. Yeah.
I don't really follow either one. I'm not a member of any church. I don't believe in, Satan as I'm not a theistic Satanist. I'm not a LaVeyan Satanist. I'm not any type of Satanist. I would never claim for myself to be that. I use those things as kind of ways to explain ideas and explain concepts that I have or whatever, right? There's definitely a lot of crossover between most of my ideas and like LaVey and the Church of Satan, Temple of Satan. But I would never say I agree 100% with any of these ideologies. Like, first and foremost, I'm an anarchist, I'm vegan, I'm straight edge. Those are very kind of individualistic ideas that I hold for myself, and that's it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, well, I mean, I would find it to be strange if you were sort of a part of the Satanic Temple, because over the years, me just reading and studying about them, it seems to be that they've almost become what they were railing against to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like anybody that starts to kind of get into those organizations or whatever, they start to kind of compromise themselves, they start to kind of go along with what everybody else says or what the leadership says or whatever. So, I mean, if I was to identify as a Satanist, I would be a individualist Satanist or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, like I mentioned, I follow Mikhail Bakunin, not follow, but I enjoy Mikhail Bakunin, Max Stirner, Proud Hound, Lucy Parsons, those type of anarchists that are very much individualist anarchists. Even one of the songs on the record is called Propaganda of the Deed, and that's like an anarchist term too. So there's a lot of little hints towards my personal philosophies in this record.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could tell. Well, it's funny because I can tell on most of these, it's very much like when you said you were vegan, I knew that, that had to come from, trying to think of which song it was. It's definitely the one about, Gorged. Yeah. Yeah, so it was like Gorged. I figured that one out. At first I wasn't sure, and then I got to the part about the steak, and I'm like, oh, okay, I gotcha. So, it's interesting.
Again, I try to write things in a way where most of the band will say, yeah, that's fine, and I agree with them. Like, they haven't really ever given me any crap about anything that I've written about. There's only one other vegan in the band, one other vegetarian in the band who happens to be vegan as well. So it's like half the band is vegan, half the band isn't. But they don't have a problem with me speaking up about it, Mm-hmm. I'm definitely not preaching towards people of like, hey, everybody needs to believe the same things. But again, going towards the knowledge and kind of authority or whatever. The authorities are the people that know the most scientists, most major organizations will say, hey, meat is a major cause for destruction in the world, Mm-hmm. So if people could just take this song and go, hey, you know what, I'm going to cut back on my meat consumption by 50%, that'd be amazing,
Yeah. Yeah, we've actually tried to do that at my house, and it's more... It's not so much like a global awareness thing, but it is more mm-hmm. because I really detest the idea of factory farming. If you just watch one or two documentaries where it just shows what happens, I mean, it's pretty nauseating. And, so that's sure. My conflict is that I still eat meat, but at the same time, I'm trying to, it's like, okay, I'll try to stick with maybe a local farmer where I know he's at least taking care of them, even though there's a weird irony in the fact that he's taking care of them to slaughter them, but at least they're being treated better than being thrown into like this giant industrial chain and having their throats cut.
Yeah, I think there is a differentiation. Like I understand that the end result is the same, but I do believe that there is a differentiation between agribusiness and small farmers or like, an indigenous approach to like decolonized foods and stuff like that. Again, I'm not preaching that everybody should be vegan, but being vegan for the majority of the time is two meals out of the day instead of eating meat 3 meals out of the day. It makes a huge difference. And it will make a huge difference towards not just the animals, but towards the people who are exploited. Most factory workers are illegal immigrants, because mm-hmm. Americans don't want to do the work or whatever. So it helps down the line. It's veganism is an idea of less pain per mouthful. It's not about purity. It's not about what level of vegan you are or whatever. So like if we go out to eat, the band goes out to eat. They eat what they want. I eat what I want. Nobody like clowns on anybody. Unless they're eating something disgusting or I'm eating something disgusting, but generally we're just like, hey, like we're individuals. We're, we make the choices that we make for ourselves.
Yeah. And I mean, it's good that people, especially when you're in a band that, it's got to be almost like a marriage where you have to be able to be like, okay, you do your thing, I'll do mine. No problem.
Yeah. Yeah. To that degree, we have to, kind of reach the consensus of like, hey, we're all going to agree on everything, or we're just going to agree that sometimes, one of us is going to win, or two of us are going to win, or we're going to compromise in those type of like ways or whatever, So mm-hmm. You're not always going to be right, you're not always going to be wrong, and you just have to kind of learn to accept those things, and it works out fine that way,
Yeah. Yeah. Have any of you said that most of the time the guys are fine with what you write? Has there ever been a point where one of them is just like, dude, this is fucked up? Yeah.
No, I think at one point, like, they've been like, hey, that's a weird word. Like, I think I used the word wacko on something. It was a stupid word, but, like, it was meant to be kind of in a silly stupid kind of way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think they made fun of me for that one for a while, but whatever, like, generally the topics, again, either they don't care and they're not reading them, or they really are just like, oh, we know Sergio, he's fine. He's not a dick. Maybe my lyrics come off like I'm a dick, but I'm not.
Well, yeah, talking about, how most of the songs are one way, the track that stuck out to me on this album was Revenge, which, if I'm pretty sure I'm correct here, but that it sounds like it's almost a love letter to the movie Mandy that came out last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that one was just the fun one. That one was like the one, like, because I use a lot of pop cultural references towards, like, in my writing. Like, I will watch a movie or watch TV or watch whatever, and like I'll kind of make references to it or use it as a means to, like, talk about something. Mandy, I was not trying to talk about anything. I was just like, this movie's dope. I love this movie. I want to write a song about this movie, So, on the other hand, Singe is a Planet of the Apes reference. It's, originally it was French, so it's Le Planète du Singe. So it's actually pronounced Singe, not Singe. But there's a play on words. It means ape. It also means to burn. So that whole movie series, the original movie series, definitely had a huge impact on me. I rewatched them all, and I'm like, no wonder I'm this fucking way. No wonder I'm vegetarian. They always talk about how the apes are vegetarian, and, they're, like, I identify with them as, like, being immigrants, being revolutionaries, and having a brand new society, all that sort of stuff. So, that one, although it's a movie reference, and it's based just on movies, it's definitely a little bit more in line with my politics. But Mandy is just pure fun. Pure, like, this movie's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if I were still in my drug days, that would have been the perfect movie. It would have been my holy grail.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's weird, because, yes, I'm straight edge, but I love drug, like, influenced bands. I love drug-wild movies. Like, I love Mandy, I love Spun. Greg Rocky used to make all these movies. I don't know if you know Greg Rocky, but he did Nowhere, and what's he doing? Something Generation. God damn it.
Was it Doom Generation?
Doom Generation.
Oh, yeah, gosh, yeah, that was a fucked up movie.
yeah, so I love all that sort of stuff. Like, especially Nowhere. Like, Nowhere is just a super weird, druggy fucking movie. So I love all that sort of stuff.
I'll have to check that one out. I didn't know that there was another. I saw Doom Generation, and I think I was about 19 at the time, and it messed my head up for a good week. So I should watch the next one.
He had, like, I don't know if it was a trilogy, but I think they called it a trilogy. But it was like 3 pretty good Greg Rocky movies, and everyone's in this other one, Nowhere. It's like Ryan Phillippe, Nev Campbell, Shannon Doherty, Mina Suvari.
Wow.
Like, legitimately, the James Duvall, like, every 90s actor was in this movie. You can watch it now and be like, yo, there's like 40 people that I know in this movie. But, yeah.
It's like Beverly Hills, or was it Beverly Hills 90210 and Pacific Heights, or is that the right one?
Yeah, it's literally everybody that did all, like, 90s television, 90s movies, but doing drugs and doing really fucked up, crazy, psychedelic shit,
Oh, I love the idea of that.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool.
That sort of reminds me of when I think it was Luke Perry showed up on that TV show Oz, and he's running around like full frontal naked. I remember it was just like, how's that? That's crazy.
Yeah, I was a huge Luke Perry fan, but I did not know that he did that to Gotham.
Right. Yeah, I was watching with my wife. She had a big crush on him in the 90s, and she wasn't upset to see that scene. We'll just say that.
Yeah. She was like, ooh, nice.
Yeah, oh gosh. Okay, so I'm trying to think of some of the other stuff I was going to ask you about. See, I could go down the road and talk about movies all day long. I'm a big movie nerd.
Yeah, I if you get me on a tangent, I will kind of dive deep in it, and we'll kind of get lost in what we were trying to talk about anyway.
Well, you know what?
Yeah,
actually,
whatever you want to talk about, I'm okay with.
That actually reminds me. I'll have to ask you something. I would be interested what your take is on this. So last night I let my daughters watch that movie Apocalypto. which is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. What's that?
Yeah. I watched like up until the last 15 minutes yesterday, and then I was like, I'm tired, and I watched it again. I finished it 2 days.
Oh, no kid, that's hilarious. Yeah, we watched it last night, and that's probably one of my favorite movies of all time, but it's so divisive for people because that it's directed by Mel Gibson.
Sure.
Does that have any kind of effect on your enjoyment of a movie if you know that it's directed or written by somebody who maybe you don't agree with their politics or their belief systems and whatnot?
I mean, my thing is this. I'm a human. Everyone's human. We're not all going to agree on everything. We're all going to make mistakes. No one's perfect. I'm not looking for purity. I know that he fucked up. Never going to make excuses for him, but I'm not giving him money. If I'm not giving him money, I don't feel that I'm supporting him. You know, like, I know that people make the differentiation between listening to, sketchy music and supporting sketchy music. Like, I'm not trying to listen to Nazi bands. I will not support Nazi bands financially or by giving them a listen. But if somebody's going to make the choice to listen to a sketchy band like that, like, going back to the black metal thing, like, I totally dislike Burzum. Does that mean that people cannot like Burzum? People can like whatever they like. He's not talking about Nazism in his music. He's just a sketchy dude. But don't give him your money. Do not give him your money.
Yeah.
There's a difference between financially supporting somebody, and just kind of enjoying what art is. If you look at every single musician and every single artist ever in the history of art, Picasso, Van Gogh, Da Vinci, Bowie, Kurt Cobain, Tupac, everybody has skeletons in their closets, Mm-hmm. Are they human? Yes. Do they make mistakes? Yes. Should they be accountable for the mistakes? Yes. But once somebody lets go of their art, that art now has meaning for you. Now you have an attachment to it. Now you look at it in a different way. So art doesn't belong to artists. Art belongs to the people that consume it. So if you want to consume art, that's fine. Just don't support artists that you don't agree with. That's my point of view.
Yeah, I've been like that for a long time. The idea that if, for example, if I come across something that like a person I don't agree with, but they make some art, and if I'm able to maybe, digest it in whatever way I digest it, that's fine. Yeah. But when you start actually throwing money at it to support it, that's different. I agree with that completely.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to, bootleg a Burzum tape and give you a free copy, I'm not like, oh, you're a Nazi sympathizer.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm just like, oh, you like shitty music, but you're not a Nazi sympathizer. You know what I mean? Like, so there's huge differences. Like, we all buy music, even if the artist is super amazing. I don't know who the fuck can be claimed as clean. Let's just say Prince was 100% clean. He wasn't like a Jehovah's Witness or some weird shit. Mm-hmm. Even if he was super clean, but you were giving him money to this record company, do you know everybody that works at that record company? Are they super clean? There's no such thing as conscious consumerism under capitalism, because everybody makes money. So I don't know. I don't have a solid answer, but just enjoy what you enjoy. Try not to be a dick. Yeah.
Right. Which is like that's a basic metal ethos right there. Is enjoy it, try not to be a dick. Well, let me ask you then. With this album being called "Satan is King," and you've talked about what the symbolism and whatnot is. With your background when you were growing up, did you have any kind of religious upbringing, or was it just completely, devoid of your life from the beginning?
So, my parents are Argentinian. I'm first generation. I was born here. Argentina is super Catholic, but my mom and her family were always atheists. Well, I don't know about always, but, my grandparents were atheists, my mom were atheists. So they didn't have that, And then my dad is semi-religious. I would say he's kind of culturally Catholic. He doesn't go to church. He's not active. He doesn't ever preach to me about God. He never mentions anything about God to me. But, you know, his mom was religious and Catholic, and having kind of an Italian background is part of the culture, you know?
Yeah.
But it was never, none of that was ever put into me. I was never made to go to church. We went to the Vatican just because, you know, it was a cultural thing, like, oh, let's go look at the Vatican, you know? Like, I remember one time I walked through the Vatican, and they opened up this door called La Porta Santissima that they only open every 200 years or something, like for a day. Some ridiculous thing.
Wow.
And so we walked through, and there was people crawling, and I was talking to my dad in Spanish, and I just kind of said, like, what the fuck are these people crawling for? And he kind of, like, backhanded me. He was like, gosh, show respect. Like, don't cuss in church. You know what I mean? But I guess the whole thing was that if you pass through the doors, your past, present, and future sins are cleansed, something like that. So if God happens to exist and he happens to be Catholic, I'm good. You know, I'm fine. But yeah, we never had any of that stuff. Like, I had interest in religion, but as kind of like an anthropology thing, sociology sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I took comparative religion classes and world religion classes. I learned about Jainism and Zoroastrianism and Buddhism and all this other interesting stuff. So the interest is, I think, purely my own.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's not that you were really pushed in that direction. It was more like an intellectual curiosity.
Yeah, and I mean, even the religious thing, like, if people are religious, fine, so be it. You know, like, I don't care. Like, I'm an individual, like, you know, it is what it is, but it was never, like, pushed on us. You
said it was never pushed on you?
Yeah, never.
Okay.
Never. It was never, like, an issue, so.
Okay. I mean, because, yeah, it's interesting because there are... everybody that I talk to, they do have their sort of own interesting background as to why they may or may not believe. And I always find that kind of fascinating because there are just as many stories of people who are raised in a very devoted religious family as there are people who are raised in a family that didn't even acknowledge religion existed. And I think that's interesting.
We weren't devoid in terms of, like, you know, I saw people that would cross. Sorry, good. I would like see people that would, like, do the cross every time they would, like, cross a church or a graveyard or whatever. But you know, I didn't live in a vacuum. You know, I did see other people that were religious and know other people that were religious. So to me, it was kind of fascinating. I was always like, oh, that's interesting that you believe that. You know, like, I wonder why you believe that. You know, but
yeah. Again,
I'm a big Joseph Campbell fan. I'm a big mythology fan. You know, The Power of Myth is an awesome book. There's a book called The Jesus Mysteries by Peter Gandhi and Timothy Freke, Freke, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it goes into, like Gnostic Christians and kind of the mythological cult beginning of Christianity. So I've always been fascinated in terms of how it affects society, not is it real, because I don't believe that it's real, but its effects are real. So
yeah. Well, going back to movies, I remember watching this movie called Valhalla Rising.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, we wrote a song about that one.
Oh, did you?
yeah, the song called Crux on, like, a split a while back. Yeah, I love that movie.
As a Christian, watching that movie, I was actually really fascinated by the way it portrayed the Vikings' perception of Christianity, and the way that he's like they drink their god's blood and eat his flesh. That's insanity, you know. And you know, that was like the first time I ever had a perspective on it like that before. It was interesting.
Sure. Like, I mean, some people think it's the literal blood of Christ and body of Christ, you know. So it's this weird cannibalistic ritual almost, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, the thing about religion is all religions have their quirks and have their things that make sense if you have the logic of that religion. So, for example, Jainism, right? There's like 10 million Jains in the world. Most of them are in India. And they believe that karma attaches itself to your soul and darkens your soul. So they're mostly vegan. They mostly eat raw fruits and vegetables because they don't want to cook with fire, because they don't want to kill any insects, because all insects, all life has souls. They sweep in front of them because they don't want to step on insects, because they don't want to darken their soul. They wear face masks so that they don't have, insects going to their mouth, because they don't want to darken their soul.
Wow.
So this whole logic goes through even to the most extreme Jains, which are Jains who won't shower because they don't want to kill bacteria. If they're attacked by an animal or attacked by anything, they don't fight back, because that's violence and it darkens your soul and you won't be reborn. Something like 24 Jinas, I think is what they're called, have ever ascended to their version of heaven. It makes sense if you believe in that logic. You know, like they will starve themselves to death because they believe that fruits and vegetables also have souls. It makes sense in terms of that logic. So all religion has logic if you believe in, those ideas. But, once you kind of step outside of those ideas, you're like, oh, this is a weird ritual. This is a very odd thing. But me personally, I think all religion, all isms, all these sort of things arise out of a need of survival, an explanation of your world. And culturally, everywhere is going to have different worlds, different threats, different resources, different whatever. So you're going to have different explanations at all times, which is why there's so many different religions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of the times, what I think is fascinating is that if you go back and if you look at the origins of a great deal of religions and stories that have been passed down through generations and whatnot, you'll find a very similar sort of origin story. I'm half Native, I'm half Lumbee, half Native American, and one of the stories that comes from one of the older tribes is, I think the origin story is like man and woman, and instead of it being an apple, it's a strawberry. But the stories are very similar. I think that's kind of interesting too, to think about all the divergent religions, and yet if you distill them down to their basic core, many of them actually kind of weirdly agree with each other.
Yeah, no, I mean, because from my point of view, like most of those myths or, the origin stories or whatever are all based on kind of universal experiences, right? That's why you have so many flood myths and Native American mythology and as well as Christian mythology, Judaism, Muslim ideology, Islam. You look at most of them, they're born, virgin births. Most of their mothers are Maya, Maria, Burr. Most of them, it's just they have so many similarities when you really start to kind of compare religions that you really kind of see it in the same way as Joseph Campbell. It's this story of being an animal, being animalistic, and moving up in the world and being more spiritual or being more enlightened, right? Mm-hmm. Ram Dass wrote, Be Here Now, and he kind of explains the Jesus mythology in the same way. He's offered wine when he's on the cross that, is going to make him not feel his pain, and he denies it and all that sort of stuff. Because they're saying, hey, you need to be in the moment of your life, and you need to kind of see that pain and all that sort of stuff will eventually elevate you to a more enlightened, to being a higher being, So I think they all have common thread,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I think that, and it seems like what you were talking about, suffering seems to be a prevalent theme in a great deal of religions as well. Yeah,
and, the ultimate payoff for that sort of suffering or for that sort of enlightenment or whatever, So, even Satan I would see as kind of being a similar figure as Jesus, somebody who becomes king, Satan is king, so is Jesus, Jesus is king, Satan is king, right? It's just Satan happens to be king of the underworld. But, he rebels. Jesus kind of rebels against, his, this old religion or whatever, of Judaism, kind of creates Christianity by rebelling against kind of what he saw as the bastardization of Christian principles. Mm-hmm. So there are similarities even in those myths, even in Satan and Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it to me, it's weird. I don't necessarily sympathize with Satan per se, but it's like say Judas is one of those types that he has done something terrible, and I guess in on some level he suffered for what he did, and I almost feel like he was even allowed some sort of enlightenment regardless of what he did. I feel like he's kind of given a hard time in the Bible, or maybe not even the Bible, but I would say with like a lot of Christians in general. But I feel like he in a weird sort of way, if you believe in the Bible, then he served a purpose towards the Christian salvation, and to kind of give him a hard time is not cool. I almost feel like he did more than a lot of other people did.
It's not very Christian-like, right? But, here's the thing. Like, I don't know if you saw our album covers, right? So our very first record was "He Had It Coming," and it's that infamous kind of photo of the Vietnam general shooting a Viet Cong sympathizer.
Mm-hmm.
But it's with Jesus on the cover, right? That shouldn't be offensive. The very mythology of Christianity is he had it coming. God is all-knowing. He's omniscient, omnipotent. So he knew what was going to happen. He knows what's going to happen for all of eternity. So he knew he was sending his son to die. He literally had it coming. That was his purpose.
Yeah.
His purpose, according to Christians or Christianity, is for him to sacrifice himself so that we can be cleansed of sin, right? Mm-hmm. Or original sin or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a blood sacrifice, just like Isaac, right? I forget who was going to sacrifice his
Abraham.
son. Yeah, Isaac, right? There you go. And so there's certain things that I'm like, listen, we're not really trying to be offensive to people who understand their religion. People who don't understand the religion will get offended by an image like that, but it's like, how can this be offensive? Like, this is the whole purpose of what you claim the Son of God came to earth to have happened to him, Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, like, even that juxtaposition of, like, having it be black and white. Society is not black and white, morality is not black and white. Or, like, having it be, a communist, anti-communist versus a communist or whatever is like, listen, we're not fighting. These ideologies don't necessarily have to fight. You can learn from religion. You can be a good person and be religious. Me personally, I think there's tons of people, and no offense, but there's tons of people that have dumb ideas and are good people. I have dumb ideas, and I would consider myself a good person, So when people, especially in, like, extreme music, kind of, attack Christianity, I think they attack it from a place of, like, misunderstanding, and you're a piece of crap because you believe in whatever you believe in. And to me, I'm like, no, I've known good Christians, I've known good Muslims, I've known good everything, but, their ideas are up for attack, but then as people, I think as long as they're fine, they're fine, like, their beliefs don't necessarily make them bad people.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Me being straight edge, what does that matter? Does that make me a good person? Me being vegan, does that make me a good person? I could be a piece of shit. I just don't have to eat animals or do drugs. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about my beliefs. It's about what I do. You know what I mean? Like, you could have tons of terrible beliefs. I don't know, you could be a white separatist. Okay, that's your right to have that belief. I think you're a piece of crap for being a white separatist. Mm-hmm. But if you keep that to yourself and you just do your own thing, that's fine. You're not that bad of a person in my eyes, you're a person with terrible ideas, but as long as those ideas don't become active, so you're not acting on those ideas, that's okay. Have your shitty idea.
Right. Yeah, I'm the same way. Is that in terms of a great deal of my friends, I would say the majority of my friends are actually probably atheist or agnostic, and it's never a problem for us. It's more it just makes conversations interesting. But in no way, shape, or form have I ever thought, well, they're going to go to hell because they don't believe the same way I do. I'm like, I have a hard time believing that God would give them a hard time just because they didn't have the exact same beliefs I did. So
exactly. This dude. I really struggle to believe that. If there was a just, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent God, that he would be like, well, Sergio over here, never did one single bad thing in his life, but we got this other guy over here, he's a piece of shit, he's a serial killer, he's a serial rapist, but, he accepted Jesus at the last day of his life, so he's going to heaven, Sergio's going to hell. You know what I mean? I somehow don't think that that's how it works, but...
Well, my dad has an interesting perspective on that. He says that he thinks that the people who do that have to pick up a trash around the gates of heaven for about 100 years before they can get in.
They still got to do a little bit more work.
Yeah, they got to put in a little more effort. It's like, come on, you kind of dicked your way in.
Yeah, they're in heaven, but they're the janitors, or they're the plumbers, or whatever,
Yeah. Oh man, well, one more thing I wanted to talk to you about is, what made you guys want to kind of go with the style of power violence as the ACDC, musical genre? I mean, I love it. I actually like power violence because I love the similarities and the way that style of music takes a great deal of the punk ethos, which is get to the point and make it as hard and as fast as possible. What is it that about that style of music that drew you guys to it?
I mean, I think it was just, in the beginning it was a conscious thing that my guitarist wanted. He was like, I want to sound like this, right? And for me personally, I was like, I don't really care. I don't care what band I'm in. I like to be in a band. That's cool. That sounds fun. And, when we kind of started doing these things, it made sense because power violence is the one genre that kind of mashes everything in together, fast and punk and D-beat and crust and a little bit of hip-hop groove and just everything that I enjoyed can be filtered through ACDC into a quote-unquote power violence song. Mm-hmm. There's no real kind of definition of what power violence needs to sound like. If you listen to Man is a Bastard versus listening to Inkfest, you're like, these are two completely different bands, how is this the same genre? Or, Agents of Satan or no less versus, I don't know, Mind Eraser over whatever. So it just makes sense. I think that's just the one genre that we fit into the most. I wouldn't say that we're a traditional power violence band, but it's definitely the one genre that we probably find the most acceptance in because we fuck with all types of genres.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is it one of those things where, were you influenced by thrash, or was it, more of a death metal kind of a thing?
No, I mean, I came into punk and hardcore through Minor Threat, Dead Kennedys, Subhuman, Nirvana, and I pretty much went directly from that sort of stuff and anarcho-punk directly into power violence because I was like, this is fun, this is silly, this doesn't take itself too serious. I got into going to shows around 98, 99, early thousands, and that sort of stuff was always around. I would say power violence and like bandana thrash, like hardcore, fast hardcore punk, like Minus Red, DS13, Tear It Up, Down in Flames, Rambo. That was all of the stuff that I kind of grew up with, you know.
What about like DRI?
I like DRI, but see, there was the one thing about me was I didn't like a lot of old punk bands, so I never was a huge fan of Bad Brains or DRI.
Oh, no kidding.
Control Max. Yeah, because there was something about the sound that the production or something that was a little too ambient. You know, because that's why I'm not a big like black metal fan, because it's a little too ambient for me. Mm-hmm. Minus had that immediacy. You know, they had that kind of like, oh shit, this makes me want to like move around, you know? But a lot of bands from the 80s kind of suffered from this like production style that was very lo-fi and ambient. It sounded like it was recorded in like an open hall. And I think I just didn't like that, you know? Like, so I don't know. I was never more on the metallic side. I was always more on the hardcore punk side. And I think DRI is a little bit too metallic for me. Like, I like the Neos. I don't know. I'm trying to blank right now on other fast hardcore bands that just, like, blew shit out of the water. Yeah, I mean, I like Descendants and, like, Adolescence. And I was a huge Subhumans fan. So, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting to me that because when you say that you're not really wild about DRI, and I get what you're saying, like in terms of production value, they were one of the first bands I thought of when I was listening to you guys, because they're one of those bands that their lyrics are very kind of to the point, and it's very much a social commentary, like, you know, what Syringes in the Sandbox and stuff like that. So that surprises me, but I get your reasoning though.
Yeah, I mean, maybe musically, because Eddie definitely loves Bad Brains and DRI and all that sort of stuff, so maybe musically, for sure. But yeah, lyrically or just me personally, like, not talking crap about any of these bands. It's just not my cup of tea, you know? It's not my favorite. Like, if someone puts it on, cool. But I'm not going to put it on.
That's actually, it's kind of interesting when you hear somebody talk about not liking a band that is like weirdly universally revered. I think that's actually cool. That it's interesting to hear why. You know, I've talked to a few people where I'm like, yeah, I really like this Led Zeppelin album. And they're like, oh, fuck Zeppelin, and I'm like, whoa. You're one of those few. I'm
not one of those people that's like, fuck, you know, screw the Beatles and all that stuff. I'm like, no, the Beatles are cool. You know, like, but I like, again, DRI is cool, but it's just, I don't know, like, people always like, do you like Youth of Today? I'm like, not really. But you listen to bands that are Youth of Today style bands now. I'm like, yeah, but that's because I'm watching them live now. So I get the energy, like, it's fun. But on the recording, you know, of some band that I haven't seen, you know, and haven't played for like the last 10, 15 years or whatever, I'm like, what? I don't really care, you know? Mm-hmm. So maybe it was that. Maybe it was more like, I care about what's relevant to me today, now, what's happening now, over idolizing some band that, like, started some genre, like, 20 years before or something, you know? Mm-hmm. Again, all due respect to those bands, but, I don't know.
Well, yeah, there's a
like
lot of...
Black Flag. You know, Black Flag's another band that everybody's like, you don't like Black Flag? I'm like, I like about a dozen songs, you know, but they got some weird crap out there, and I'm just not a huge fan. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like, well, I appreciate them. You know, that's how I always approach it when it's a band that everyone likes and I don't. I'm always like, well, I appreciate what they did.
Yeah, like I like Black Flag because they're awesome. You know what I mean? Like they're just kind of like, oh, this is cool, because it turns what that was into something new and relevant. It's funny and cool, you know? So I like them. You know, again, no hatred towards any of these other bands. Like, they are seminal, and I, like, would love to see them, even play with them, you know? Like, we have played with some of these bands. Mm-hmm. But, you know, recording-wise, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, well, you mentioned the Beatles earlier, and like, they're one of those bands that I say, I'm like, well, I appreciate them, but I don't actively seek out to listen to them, and I feel like a leper when I tell people that, you know, it's... Yeah, I mean, you know, there's people that are like, well, the Beatles never played tune, they couldn't sing, and they were just a boy band, and they were this, and they were that, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess,
but isn't everything, like, I don't really listen to, like, a lot of crazy metal and things like, oh, this isn't a boy band. It's like, you know, a couple dudes in the band trying to play all this technical crap. I'm like, I don't really care if they're hitting the right notes or the right keys, or they're all boys or all female or queer or trans or whatever. I don't really care. Like, is the band fun? Does it mean something to me? Did I hear it, you know, at a show when I was like 15? So it means something to me, you know? Like,
yeah.
Again, music and art doesn't have to mean the same thing to everybody, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh yeah, well, a friend of mine, we were at a Kylesa show several years ago. It was like a big, you know, kind of a festival type of thing, and we were watching Kylesa, and their singer and guitarist. She is, you know, she's a decent looking girl, but it was funny watching her play. Made her super hot to us. Like, we were watching her, and we were like, she's playing the shit out of that guitar, and that is super fucking cool. And then we got to talking about how it's like, how different that is from like, say, a general pop star. The pop star comes out, they're obviously hot, they're dancing, they look good, but there's something not there. It was something about the authenticity that makes them not as hot as this very regular, nice looking girl in a metal band. That, you know, was she's somehow hotter than that pop star. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's the authenticity, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, the same could be said of, I don't know, Justin Bieber versus, I don't know, someone in rock and roll, or Dave Grohl. I don't know.
Mm-hmm,
I mean,
right.
Like, it's a kind of a personality thing of like, hey, this guy, he's down to earth, plays he's a multi-instrumentalist, even though Justin Bieber plays, you know, guitar and drums and all that sort of stuff. It's like, it's more about an image sort of thing, you know? Like, I think it's just an attraction to authenticity and an attraction to connection, to having a connection to the same type of music or whatever, the same type of lifestyle or whatever it could, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I went and like, I love the band Mastodon. I love to listen to Mastodon, but I've seen them twice. But their shit is so technical that their shows are not that exciting because they have to concentrate on what they're doing, and so it's not a very lively show. And that's not a bash against them, but it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, it's. I like it, but it's just, I'm not connecting here. I connect more on the albums, you know?
Yeah, it's not so much your energy. Like, you can appreciate the art because it's technical. Like, again, I don't like a lot of technical grind. I don't like a lot of technical bands. Like, Mastodon or High on Fire, I'm not a huge fan of these kind of bands because I look at them more as, like, almost rock and roll bands, like heavy rock and roll bands.
Yeah.
But I love sludge and doom. You know, if you play Bonzilla or Weed Eater or you know, I love Dystopia, Noose Grush, all that sort of stuff. It's awesome to me, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe, again, it's more rawness. Maybe, again, it's the production. Maybe it's just, I don't know, technicalities are not that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, cool, you and every other nerd in the world can play these crazy arpeggios. Like, that's awesome. But can you just play an awesome riff? You know, like,
right.
Everybody loves Sleep. I like Sleep, but I like the songs that they actually kind of have riffs, and they're not just jamming. Like, I don't care to watch a Grateful Dead, a heavier Grateful Dead, you know? But not talking shit. Again, I respect them. I like them. I know what they're doing. But it's just not for me. I want more energy, you know?
Right. Well, you know, that's something I've kind of come to a conclusion about in my life, is that I prefer listening to, like, sludgy doom type of stuff when I'm in my car and whatnot. But when I go to a show, I would actually rather see some guys more like you, where it's like the insanity is going to compel a show that is going to make everybody lose their shit. And, you know, and in doom shows, I enjoy them, but, I mean, everybody's moving real slow, and that's just kind of like,
Yeah, you have to be in a mood, or you have to get in a zone for that sort of thing, you know? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I feel like everybody that like watches Sleep is super high, and they're like, "This is amazing." I'm like, "That's cool," but so the hippies got high and watched Grateful Dead, and they said the same thing. So I don't know.
Right?
Like,
yeah.
But they have like on the last record they released, I think 2 of the songs are just super killer riffs. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what songs they were, but like, and then the other ones are kind of like just jamming. That's fine, but
yeah,
I'm not a fan of it. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I have to be in a mood for it.
About everybody.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, I mean, with talking about shows and whatnot, are you guys kind of at a standstill because of the pandemic? And do you have any idea when you might be able to go back on the road again?
No, I mean, right now everything's just in the air. You know, everything's kind of moving and stuff to like, well, what if we do November, October, December? Like, tentatively, sure, you know, but it's probably going to get moved, you know, because everybody's talking about shows in 2021, 2022. So, you know, it just is what it is. We have to adapt and just move things whenever we can to wherever.
Right. You know. Are you planning on doing any of these like virtual shows like a lot of bands are doing?
No, it would not translate well with us. You know, like who wants to see us do a virtual live set? You know, like in mosh in their living room, like that's whack. You know, unless we figure out a way how to translate our music acoustically, which is an idea that we floated around just to be funny. It's not going to happen, you know, but, like, I think it would be great to have, I don't know, us playing an acoustic song and me just screaming my ass off. Even attempting to actually sing would be good, too, so.
That would be really funny to hear an acoustic unplugged version of Satan is King where you're just first to betray, you know?
yeah, like, if somebody wanted to pay for that, I'd be like, all right, it's an experience. It's never going to happen again, but it's an experience. You should pay for it. But, yeah, I don't see it happening anytime soon, at least.
Yeah, I would imagine that's going to be kind of difficult, but yeah, if you ever do the unplugged thing, I'll be right there to watch that.
Anal Cunt did it, you know, the Picnic of Love, but I think we would do it, but more on a serious note. It'd be fun.
Oh, right. That's right. Oh, yeah. Or maybe you could, like, team up with Anal Cunt and, you know, do some sort of weird crossover.
Yeah, you know, they're all dead now, aren't they? Like, Seth's dead, the guitarist died. I don't know.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah. So,
that's like one of the banes of being a fan of like rock and heavy metal music is they tend to die kind of like within a decade or so of enjoying them, and I can't keep up with all the people who've passed away.
To be honest, I was surprised that they weren't dead any sooner. But you know, like I'm like, wow, they really lasted that long. People really gave that much of a shit about them for that long. That's crazy. But, whatever.
Oh man, well Sergio, I'm going to let you go. I've kept you on probably way longer than I should have, but I enjoyed it, man. I appreciate you talking to me.
No, thank you for indulging me and all that good stuff. So.
Oh yeah, I aim to please. So, but well, let our listeners know where they can find your stuff, like your social media, website, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Satan is King is on Prosthetic Records, I think .com, and all our social medias. If you Google ACxDC, we will pop up. The other ACDC who took our name from us, they're not us. So just ACxDC will take you Instagram, our Facebook, our Twitter, probably our store. I think we have our store linked there if anybody wants to buy anything or whatever. So, yeah, we're fairly easy to get a hold of.
Okay. Well, that actually leads me to one last question. Have you ever had guys coming up to you at shows and being mad because you weren't actually AC/DC?
No, but we have had people disappointed. Sometimes you tour the world and there's a little bit of a misinformation or misunderstanding of, languages or whatever. So we played China and everybody's like, wow, we can't believe AC/DC is going to play this really small club in China. And then we show up and they're like, this was not what we were expecting. So there's definitely been some disappointment. There's been people that thought we were like the ACDC backup band, you know, like again in China and other parts of the world. We're like, oh, what band are you? Like, oh, ACDC. You're like, what? Let's take a picture. We're like, sure, whatever. It doesn't hurt, you know?
Yeah. Oh, no.
Hey. Again, not sure what happened.
I don't know. Yeah, this is obviously the phone telling us we got to get off, so.
Yeah. So you guys are talking way too much. It's God trying to punish me, trying to smite me right now.
Right, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. But, yeah, thank you. You know, thank you for having me. And let me know, you know, how to get a hold of it or whatever, you know.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Well, thanks, Sergio. I appreciate it, man.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, have a good day.
Stay safe.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So that's going to do it for another episode of the Rock God Podcast. Make sure you go to heavy-vinyl.com to see any new records that we're going to be having coming out this week. Also, go to our social media pages, Facebook, Heavy Vinyl and Cassettes, Instagram, Heavy Vinyl Records, Twitter, @VinylHeavy. And make sure you check out ACxDC's Bandcamp page at ACxDC.bandcamp.com, as well as their Facebook page at ACxDC, and their Twitter page at ACxDC_666. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, God bless.